Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China. Late last month, after 5 days of virtual and real meetings in 5 countries, Washington's Summit for Democracy wrapped up with a 3,666-word declaration. The declaration had 4 paragraphs of preamble and 17 points that the US Department of State emphasized as their methods of progressing democracy. The document's littered with factors the writers have included to suit the US government's agenda, but which any critical observer could challenge as being something the US has already failed to provide its own people and the world. The opening paragraph references several things. First of all, free and fair elections. That's something many, including the former president, claim the US does not have. Peaceful transition of power, which the entire world saw was definitely missing from their last election. Let's wait for the next one to see. Safety of journalists, and we could mention Julian Assange here as the most famous of them, but in 2022 alone, 15 other journalists were arrested and charged in the United States. Delivering peace and stability to the world. While many US citizens are of the opinion that their country delivers these two rights to the world, millions more who have experienced US-led invasions, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, even sanctioned countries such as Cuba, Venezuela, the DPRK, or the other 20-plus sanctioned countries would disagree. And finally, the right to live without fear of violence and threats to safety, which is noble. But in a country where 1,917 mass shootings have occurred in 3 years, it's hard to believe these are not just empty words to be ignored by lawmakers. In the first 3 months of this year alone, there were 137 mass shootings, resulting in 200 deaths and over 500 injuries. Throughout the declaration, the words international law appear 6 times, twice with strong support in relation to Ukraine, once in cyberspace, which the US were caught breaching in September 2022, and twice related to the crimes of genocide, which the US consistently fails to acknowledge in relation to its own action. But Hollywood continues to glorify. The final mention of international law related to arbitrary detention of individuals to leverage state-to-state relations. Frederic Pierucci of the French company Alstom and Meng Wanzhou of Huawei might have some comment about this. Already, the gist of the message to the rest of the world is clear. Do as we say, not as we do. Of the 17 points listed in the declaration, the first is a general one, reaffirming the commitment of the signatories to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and to hold accountable alleged perpetrators of human rights violations. And the emphasis on alleged was added by me, as it's the most important word in the document so far. It effectively means to hold accountable any perpetrators suspected, not proven. And this is exactly what is currently happening in relation to places such as China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, or any of the 24 countries sanctioned by the USA. Proof is not a requirement. Under the wording of this declaration, allegations are very easy to find, but extremely difficult to prove. Now they don't need to. Every single point could be looked at in detail and criticized as hypocritical, especially on the part of the USA, but point 7, corruption, is worth taking a closer, more detailed look at because of one particularly important recent incident. The declaration calls to collectively prevent and combat corruption in all its forms. 189 countries, including the USA, have signed up and most have ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption, and almost all countries strive to remove it or at least reduce it from their society. China has been the most prominent in this over the last 15 years. In fact, academic reports compared China's endemic corruption of a couple of decades ago with the USA's period of growth through the 1870s and the 1930s, and it predicted corruption in China would decline. It has clearly done that, and it's done so in a remarkable way. In 2021, a record number of 627,000 Chinese officials were punished in some way for corruption and or negligence. However, the US now accuses the current government of purging opposition rather than the reality of purging a scourge that was holding society back. Once discredited, prosecuted, or self-exiled, those who have been caught in the corruption net are fated as victims rather than criminals by the USA. But if we were to look at the punished officials up to 2021, we'd find most were very low ranking, hardly any kind of threat to the leadership. Strangely, the US Congress produces reports about China's anti-corruption campaign on a regular basis, whilst basically ignoring their own. According to a foreign policy report in 2021, US corruption was at its worst in a decade, admitting that COVID was not just a health crisis, but a corruption crisis too. Showing how banking rules were ignored and allowing drug barons and crime syndicates to move money around freely, the White House, in a press release, went so far as to announce a Biden administration strategy on countering corruption. But still, neither the Senate nor Congress debates it or legislates to prevent it. In fact, when they do debate it, it's to legalize it. The US has the greatest laws relating to bribery designed to enrich lawmakers. Sites such as Investopedia.com struggle to define the difference between lobbying and bribery. The only difference is that lobbying is defined as legal, while bribery is not. What makes lobbying legal is disclosure. If it's not disclosed, then it's bribery. These are effectively the same thing wearing a different jacket. According to transparency.org in 2020, there are many corruption problems within the USA. For example, the firing of Inspector General who investigated Trump and another who investigated Pompeo. It's even more worryingly, the attacks on whistleblowers. And while this report related to the Trump presidency, it continued well into the Biden administration, and that was exemplified by the recent arrest of the Pentagon leaker, Jack Teixeira, who, it could be argued, might be a criminal because of his actions. But the massive media campaign surrounding his arrest and the information leading up to it has completely disregarded and successfully deflected from the fact that some US officials have acted illegally. And those people are not just unpunished, but they're completely unmentioned by the media. The crime of exposing crimes, as the US has time and time again been proven to be more important than the crime of committing international war crimes, espionage, or acts of human rights abuses by those people exposed. For a Democracy Summit declaration to be taken seriously, the self-proclaimed leader of the democratic world and the authors of that document should lead by example. Clearly, they do not. Thanks once again for watching Jerry's Take on China. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.